Right now, the homeless crisis is plaguing many U.S. cities. But now a rural town in Oregon could be setting the legal standards for how communities address it. This week, the Supreme Court will hear arguments on homelessness for the first time in over 4 decades. Supreme Court reporter at the National Law Journal, Jimmy Hoover, is here with more. Jimmy, welcome back to the show. So the question before the court is about the 8th Amendment. I just want to explain this a little bit to our viewers. The Supreme Court, why did they choose to hear the case? And tell us more about the 8th Amendment and what that means.
They chose to hear the case because as you said, a small city in the south of Oregon called Grants Pass was sued in court for its anti-camping ordinances, which a lower court found violated the 8th Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment for involuntarily homeless people who had nowhere else to go. There were not enough shelter beds in their city, and so these ordinances, which came with heavy fines and even criminal prosecution for repeat offenders, were seen as basically criminalizing the human functions of sleeping and resting for homeless individuals who had nowhere else to go. It was tantamount to telling them that they basically just had to leave. And so the court sided in favor of these 3 homeless plaintiffs against the city. It went up on appeal, which affirmed the ruling. And after a wave of backlash from a number of city and state governments across the country, the Supreme Court agreed to hear this Oregon city's appeal, and we'll hear oral arguments on Monday morning.
Jimmy, there's so many cities, so many states that are dealing with the same problem. Why is this case, making precedent, and why do you think that the Supreme Court, after 4 decades, decided to take this specific case when it comes to homelessness?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a case in a vacuum. As you said, so many states around the country are grappling with increased populations of homeless people and the public safety issues that they say large public encampments on city grounds presents. San Francisco, which has been kind of the poster child of the homelessness crisis in the American West, came to the Supreme Court and basically said, we need you to hear this case. This lower court ruling has tied our hands as local city officials to do anything about this large public safety crisis that we're dealing with. And we want to be able to make sure that there are not these large homelessness encampments throughout our city grounds. And so I think, yeah, it's a case of its moment for sure. And you are going to hear at oral arguments on Monday the city's attorney point to the crisis and the crises that various city officials are facing all over the country.
Okay, we will keep a close eye on that. Let's switch gears to Trump's presidential immunity case. That's going to be heard by the Supreme Court as well. Talk to me about the legal ramification of a ruling either way it goes, Jimmy.
Well, put it simply, it is a historic case. I mean, never in the country's 230-plus year history has a former president been criminally prosecuted, and the Supreme Court's never answered the question of to what extent does immunity attach, to what extent are presidents immune over their official conduct. And the Supreme Court's going to hear arguments on Thursday about that question in the case involving in the criminal case in D.C. federal court, where special counsel Jack Smith has accused Trump of essentially engaging in a criminal fraud conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election results. It's hard to overstate the impact of what a Supreme Court ruling on this question could be, considering its constitutional ramifications. But depending on how the court answers the question of how much immunity applies, that could potentially either open the way for Trump to be criminally prosecuted in D.C. federal court before the 2024 election, or if it's a muddy ruling, if Trump wins and he is granted immunity, or if it's a kind of a tricky question that demands further proceedings in the lower courts, you could pretty much kiss any Trump trial before the election goodbye.
Jimmy Hoover, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.